So today we're going to discuss private placements. Private placements are a significantly growing aspect of our business in the self-directed IRA space, and clearly something that all of you are interested in learning more about. So hopefully you find this presentation to be a good use of your time. Just as background before we actually get started with the presentation, as we do with all of our webinars and educational materials, we do offer a bit of a disclaimer here. The Entrust Group, or Entrust, does not provide investment advice, nor do we endorse any products. All information and materials are for educational purposes only. All parties are encouraged to consult with their attorneys, accountants, and financial advisors before entering into any type of investment. That said, just a bit of background on the Entrust Group. I see many of the participants here are current clients of ours, and many more, I'm sure, are prospective clients, or some just curious on the overall topic we're going to discuss. But for those of you that don't know, the Entrust Group is a self-directed IRA provider, and we're one of the leading providers in the space. We've been in business over 30 years. We process 12 to 16,000 client transactions per month. Over $2 billion in assets under administration currently, and that's comprised from about 20,000 plus clients that we've got. The Entrust has a very knowledgeable staff. All eligible staff at Entrust do have the CISP designation, as I do, which is a designation that really helps people gain expertise in the IRA space. And we really try to act as educators in the industry, and I think that's a key differentiator of Entrust versus a lot of our competitors. We have a national CE program, short for continuing education, and clearly we try to host a lot of webinars, in-person events. We have a great deal of content on the Learning Center section of our website, really a lot of great resources, because we really try to empower our clients and give them as much information as possible to help provide or help them make an informed investment decision. Today, clearly we're going to be discussing private placements. Just a bit of a brief agenda here, going through the various slides and topics we'll discuss. First and foremost, of course, what is a private placement offering? Give you the definition and some information regarding that. What the eligibility is to invest in private placements currently and going forward. Give you a few examples of private placements. Talk a bit about the Jobs Act of 2012 and how that impacts the private placement market. Talk about where to find various private placement investment opportunities. Talk about investing in private placements, of course, from your IRA, which is why you're all here. And then close out discussing how to open an account for those of you that don't already have one. And as I mentioned at the beginning, finalize things with a Q&A and hopefully give all of you the opportunity to learn more that may or may not have been covered in the presentation itself. So to start, what is a private placement offering? A private placement is an offering of a non-publicly traded equity or debt security, and it's generally going to be offered to a small group of accredited investors. We'll get to the definition of accredited investors momentarily. If the offering meets the exemption requirements of the Securities Act of 1933, it will actually not have to register with the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission. Instead, the company would file what's referred to as a Form D, along with supporting materials, and that gives the overview and the parameters of the offering, how much capital is being raised, and all the details of the company that is actually offering this equity or debt security. Now, as I mentioned, there is eligibility requirements generally to invest in private placements, and typically you are required to be an accredited investor to invest in these offerings. The definition of accredited investor, the individual has to have a net worth or a joint net worth with their spouse that exceeds $1 million at the time of purchase, and that excludes your primary residence. Or the other qualification you could meet would be to have an income exceeding $200,000 in each of the most recent 2 years, or joint income with your spouse exceeding $300,000 for those years. and also having a reasonable expectation that that same income level will be met in the current year. And for more information on that, I would refer you to the website listed at the bottom there for the SEC for further information on accredited investor status and what may or may not qualify. Now, that will potentially be changing quite a bit. The Jobs Act, which was passed in 2012, JOBS being short for Jumpstart Our Business Startups, hence the acronym. It was signed in April 2012. There are some provisions that are still pending of the Jobs Act, specifically Title III, which deals in large part with crowdfunding. And I think a lot of things that will be applicable to this presentation should be forthcoming and actually rolling out hopefully very soon. But specifically, this act dealt with fundraising for small businesses with crowdfunding and changing the investment limits, or what's currently the requirements for accredited investor status. Potential investors with an annual income below $100,000 will be allowed to invest no more than $2,000 or 5% of their income to a single issuer or to a single security. And potential investors with an income above this level can invest as much as 10% of their income, but not exceeding $100,000 given to one issuer. So there are changes coming to this, what was traditionally a limit regarding accredited investor status and investing in private placements. So we felt it important to discuss this topic now because it is very timely. Some examples of private placements: investments in LLCs, C corporations, private stock investments, partnerships, pooled investment funds, land trusts, and secured and unsecured notes. Basically, promissory notes or private lending to businesses that either are secured by real estate or are unsecured. As far as why would you want to invest in a privately held company, well, there's a lot of reasons. I think most of you on this webinar clearly are familiar with some of the names listed here. Facebook, Tesla, Google, Twitter are some more recent examples of companies that were privately held but have since gone public. And stocks have succeeded to varying degrees. Most of those are doing quite well, but there are a lot of companies that will gain their investors while they're still considered private companies before going public, and most of the profitability is often reaped by those early investors prior to the company going public. Those investors have a large potential to earn significantly more on their investment return than after that company going public. And clearly that was evidenced by a lot of the venture capital investments in Facebook and Google and Twitter and certainly Tesla. So really private placements give you the opportunity to get in on the ground floor before the general public and the mutual funds and a lot of the institutional investors pile in and limit some of the profitability potential. So some key things to consider before you actually invest in these types of offerings. First and foremost, is the security properly registered with the state or the federal regulators? Has that Form D been filed? And is this actually a legitimate offering? What are the various types of risk, be it environmental, competitive, legal, et cetera, to this investment? Have you spoken with customers, vendors of the company to understand their perspectives on the firm and really try to grasp what it is this business is doing, what their competitive advantage is, and what their plans are for success in the future and how they intend to achieve that? Have you verified all the information that the company provided you with? Are they actually giving you facts, or is there something going on that will be misleading potentially? And of course, what is your exit strategy? Because at the end of the day, you want to have some liquidity and be able to gain profitability or cut your losses from the business if it's not successful. So really the key thing I think in summation there is really critical to perform your due diligence with any type of investment but absolutely when you're in the private placement and space and investing in public companies that are not public yet, because really the onus is on the investor to do your homework. Ideas of where to find some of these opportunities? Well, I'm sure they're much greater than some of the things that we list here. Places that you'll hear about businesses that are getting started and looking for capital, but certainly some good places to start could be talking with your financial advisor if you've got one, doing research online, some of the various crowdfunding portals that are out there, which there's many. Networking. There's quite a few private placement, venture capital, networking and startup groups that you can join, participate in events, and hopefully learn more about some pending offerings and some opportunities that might be out there for you. So you may say, well, this is all well and good, but how do I do this type of investment from an IRA, and what are the restrictions, and what's the process? Well, first and foremost, with respect to doing this through an IRA at the Entrust Group, if you don't have one already, obviously you would need to open an account. That's something we could certainly walk you through and give you details on the process there. Beyond opening the account, the second step is getting it funded, and that's generally done by a rollover from a previous employer 401k or 403b or some other type of group retirement plan, or doing a custodian-to-custodian transfer, moving assets from a current IRA that you've got at another provider, transferring it over to fund the account with us. And the third step is, well, it mentions finding the private placement. Generally that's done prior to this whole process being started, as well as the due diligence, but actually funding the investment, basically the requirement there is submitting proper documentation, two things of which are Entrust specific forms. One piece is called a bi-direction letter. Basically this is a form that directs us, as the name implies, to purchase the investment on your behalf. We ask clients to sign a private placement disclaimer form, which will basically serve as a bit of a reminder that ultimately the due diligence requirement for investing these things, the onus is on the investor, and really you do need to perform that due diligence and do your homework before making the investment, because there are a lot of risks that go with this sort of thing. And finally, we do need the governing document for the investment, or the offering memorandum. This comes in all forms. It could be an LLC operating agreement. It could be a subscription agreement. Could be a stock purchase agreement. It really depends on how the company has structured themselves and what legal document they're able to offer that conveys ownership to your IRA. Slide's really just a reiteration of those three steps I mentioned: open the account, fund the account, and then ultimately invest in the asset. So I realize the presentation was fairly brief, but we just wanted to give a lot of overview information on investing in private placements and talk about who qualifies, as we discussed it, accredited investors. Talked a bit about the Jobs Act, and there's a lot of information that you can find online, and hopefully the status of the Title III section of the Jobs Act with regard to crowdfunding will hopefully be passing shortly, and really opening up the world of private placement investors, investments to the greater public, if you will. We talked a bit about where to find some of these opportunities, how to perform due diligence, and finally how to do this type of investment through the IRA. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions and see if there's anything that anyone would like to discuss further or get some clarification on. We'll give people a moment to type the questions in on the left, and I'll try to address them as they come in. And if someone doesn't want this addressed in a public forum, or if they've got a very specific question to ask, I'll give my information on the next slide, the final part of the presentation. You can contact me directly with any questions. Okay. First question coming in is regarding what is the process or considerations for managing a sale of a private placement asset? Well, it's a good question. It's really going to depend on the underlying security that's being invested in and what liquidity there is, whether or not it's going to be a continued offering that they're raising capital, and if so, is there actually a liquidity event prior to them potentially going public or selling the business to another? If the company does have liquidity and will actually give you the opportunity to sell your stake before one of those events occurs, then really it's a fairly straightforward process. We would have a client fill out a sell direction letter, and we would work to coordinate that sale with the company that you were invested in. Let me see some of the other questions coming in. There are quite a few. Question on when is the reduced requirements for investors going to be active? Great question. The Jobs Act, as I mentioned, was passed in 2012, so 2 years ago now, and we're still waiting on the final approval or green light from the Securities Exchange Commission that will put into effect Title III regarding crowdfunding, which will ultimately reduce those qualifications that are required. Question about investing in preferred stock or making convertible loans, so convertible note investments. Those are absolutely things that we can assist with, and please feel free to contact me if you'd like to discuss a potential investment in either one of those. A question coming in regarding from apparently an executive with a firm that is seeking to offer a private placement investment, and how Entrust would be able to connect them with investors. Unfortunately, because we're not a broker-dealer, we're an IRA custodian or an IRA administrator, we don't have the ability to give clients investment advice or directly connect them with any investment opportunities. So unfortunately, we have to stay agnostic in that role and not be directly invested or advising clients to invest in any particular security or introducing them. Another question about the timing of Title III passing. It's still up in the air. The latest I've heard is that it's hopefully going to be forthcoming, but that's also been the thought for some time. And really, ultimately, it's in the hands of the chair of the SEC, whether or not or when this gets adopted. Okay, next question. Who provides the information to an investor so proper due diligence can be done prior to the purchase? Well, I think information can be gathered from a variety of sources. Ultimately, it will come from the company that's making the offering that will be able to provide financial information, business strategy, all the things that you want to better understand prior to investing in that company. That's ultimately the first place to look. Beyond that, I would say internet research is always helpful. Well, of course, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. I think you can certainly find a wealth of knowledge about companies that are growing, that are raising capital, and hope to someday go public or sell out. So it comes from a variety of sources, and I think ultimately it depends on probably how you're introduced to any particular opportunity, whether it's through a friend or something you read or something you hear about on TV or the radio or anywhere else. The question, has Entrust received many inquiries about private placement investments? All the time. That's aside from real estate, I would say private placements is probably our most popular or most common type of investment that our clients are making, and it's growing. I think that a lot of companies are certainly in some sectors of the market are avoiding going public because of increased regulatory oversight and requirements, the filings that need to be done. I think that the private placement business and offerings therein are going to continue to grow exponentially going forward. Question, can I invest in a loan or stock of my employer? Tricky question. That's really going to depend on your, I guess, position in the company in a lot of ways, whether or not there's already an ownership percentage you have in place, whether or not you're an executive or a member of the board of that firm. There are a lot of things that would restrict that potentially investing in your current employer's stock. So that's probably a conversation I can have with that gentleman that's asking the question offline, but there are things called prohibited transactions and disqualified persons really that govern the self-directed IRA business as a whole, and something that there are some specific details to discuss whether or not that would be allowed. Similar question, can I serve on the board or act as an executive? There are a lot of restrictions in that sense because generally you would not be allowed to invest in a company where you have the ability to gain financing for that company or make certain decisions for that business. There can be restrictions on investing in that from your IRA. So again, feel free to contact me after the presentation and we can discuss the specifics of your situation. Okay. Well, we've had a lot of great questions here. I appreciate everyone's time and spending the last half hour with us. I hope you found the presentation informative. Gave you some food for thought about potential investments that you'd like to make. Again, I would encourage everybody to contact me after the presentation if you've got questions specific to your situation, a company that you'd like to invest in, whether it's a business a friend owns, something you heard about online or from another source, or as some of the questions alluded to, a company you work for, whether or not that would be an allowable investment. I'm happy to answer those questions and talk about all your specific details to make sure you get a proper thought-out answer. Obviously on the screen now is my contact information. Again, my name is Brian Kearney. I'm the Business Development Manager for the Entrust Group, responsible for the East Coast based on our Boston office. And my phone number is 781-569-5074. Email address is right on the screen, bkearney@theentrustgroup.com. And again, please contact me if I can be of further assistance. And if you do want to hear this presentation again, we should have it loaded on our website probably in the next day or so for a replay. So thank you again for your time, and have a great afternoon.